Welcome back to another great episode of the Drew Sutton Leadership Show. This is a spotlight episode of Blazer Smith. Today's guest is a powerhouse of leadership, innovation, and generosity. We're thrilled to welcome Blazer Smith, the co-founder of Pentagon Safety Equipment, where he helped scale the company to millions in sales and raised over $3 million in funding while providing life-saving protective gear across North America. But Blazer's journey didn't stop there. He's now and this is what I'm excited about, a generosity catalyst. So if that's piqued your interest, stay with the show. He's a generosity catalyst at the National Christian Foundation, helping families create giving strategies that simplify their stewardship, multiply their generosity, and maximize their impact. He's a mentor, investor, CrossFit enthusiast, and dedicated family man, while serving his community through his deep passion for helping others. Get ready to hear his incredible insights on leadership, faith, creating a lasting impact. And with that, give it up for Blazer Smith. All right, Blazer, I'm super pumped about this episode. I think you reached out to me maybe a month ago, and I'll be honest, I got the invite, and I was like, oh, what's going on here? I think we're all a little bit leery of the spam, and I was like, well, I'm kind of flattered that somebody from a National Christian Foundation wants to talk to me, but I don't know what's going to go on here. And I loved the conversation. You're so genuine. You have such a heart to help people. I fell in love, and immediately I said, we got to have you on the show. So thanks for being on.
Oh, thanks for inviting me. I appreciate it, Drew.
Yeah. So before we jump into the meat of the show here, let's let folks get to know you a little bit. Are you a coffee or tea man?
Oh, coffee.
Coffee. Well done. Let me get a drink of coffee to celebrate our American independence. Okay. Okay. So coffee or tea. Do you like pancakes or waffles?
I'd say a waffle guy, but I eat pancakes more often than not because
Gotcha.
Yeah, it's a little hard to make. I don't have a waffle iron, so
yeah, the waffle iron at the hotel is my favorite, right? Like you get it's like the treat. It's like, and then ginger ale and ginger cookies are my like airplane treat. Like I don't buy them regularly in life.
Sure.
I could. I reserve that specialty for Delta flights.
I totally understand.
Okay, we're gonna ramp it up here a little bit. Is it okay to wear socks and sandals?
No, but my children do it all the time, as well as my wife. So when you marry a German, everything changes in your life. The European have a very interesting fashion sense. So I'm not a fan, but my family, we do that.
But we do that sometimes. I get it. I called up my friends. It was like a fall day. I had sandals on, but then it was kind of cold, and I put on socks, and they were black socks because the other ones were dirty. And I was 38 years old, and I called up one of my best friends from college, and I was like, the answer is 38. That's how old you are.
Yes.
When you can wear black.
Late 30s, early 40s.
You just don't care as much, right? It's not drippy. It's okay to mess up the drip. I got some teenagers at home, so I've learned some new slang. What are your hobbies? What do you get into? So CrossFit. We didn't.
I got a lot of hobbies. So CrossFit. I mean, fortunately I don't have a herniated disc and haven't broken a bone or been hospitalized. So I'm probably an anomaly with CrossFit. I love CrossFit, and it keeps me young. But I'm a numismatist, so amateur coin collector. I'm involved in a lot of nonprofits, active investor. I try to learn as much as I can about parenting. I got a 2-year-old, I got a 3-year-old, both boys. I'm trying to learn German. I speak a little bit of Spanish. Yeah. And there's a bunch of different hobbies. I mean, a lot of my hobbies I'm not able to engage in fully because of having a 2-year-old and a 3-year-old. There's, and then running a business, and then also actively investing, and then, doing what I'm doing now. There's time is precious. And so I'm constantly trying to think through my time and innovate. So,
yeah, no, I get that. About 3 years ago, I started answering the hobby question with sitting in the bleachers at a swim meet. If you just Paretoed my life, that is where I spend so much time. It is apparently my favorite.
I'm right behind you. So I feel it coming. So
yeah. Okay, cool. Well, so that's kind of the get to know you section of the show. So you've done some interesting stuff. You didn't just jump straight into philanthropy and giving. You started out with actually some pretty big wins on your ticket. You worked for the U.S. Senate.
Yeah, I had some really interesting experiences throughout the course of my life. So I lived a bunch of different places. I was seventh generation Kentuckian on both sides of my family. Go back to Fincastle County, Virginia, before Kentucky was a state. So, which is a whole other deal. Family is the longest running family reunion currently in the state. Family background in business. My great grandfather started one of the first public companies in the state of Kentucky. I didn't know that until I moved out here, but no, I grew up in Iowa, and then had the privilege of working for one of the longest serving senators in American history, currently still serving, named Chuck Grassley. Eventually ended up working for him in his the Senate Judiciary Committee. I'm not attorney, but I was advising attorneys on immigration reform and you know telecommunications, some civil law stuff, some bankruptcy. So kind of a jack of all trades, but I have a unique ability to be able to see things and see big patterns. So yeah, and then kind of started a PPE business because I was looking at market research reports. There's not a lot of industries that have been around for 100 years that are growing at 4% compound annual growth rate. And I'm
Ooh,
like, this is kind of, what is this industry? And one thing led to another, started a business and raised a few $1 million. And everyone thought I was crazy. And then the pandemic hit. And, it's funny how, you just take a risk and sometimes crazy person becomes the smartest person in the room. So, it's been, and then now, the long story short, generosity is kind of something related to my calling that kind of came out of my work. So, but I'm happy to dive more into that.
awesome. I guess it's all that time around the lawyers that made you to appreciate
Exactly.
generosity.
Yeah, of course.
Sorry to my lawyer friends. We love you. Technically. That's cool, man. I'm actually just kind of absorbing all that you said there. So, what is your favorite law of leadership? So this is the Drew Sutton Leadership Show. So what
Sure.
is your favorite leadership characteristic or law or behavior?
I mean, I think of servant leadership. I think one of the most fascinating leaders, I think, is the person of Jesus. So a lot of people look at Jesus and they think of, okay, here's God. And I personally, being a Christian, I believe Jesus is the Son of God. But I think one of the things that's really important is when you look at the person of Jesus, arguably one of the most influential and controversial people in modern history, and everyone has their own perspective, but you got like 3 billion people that admire or respect or worship this person.
Yeah.
And in many respects, I mean, I like John Maxwell, I like Joel Osteen, I like a lot of really well-known pastors, but
Yeah.
okay, you got 12 people. He didn't really go more than like maybe 40 square miles. He never wrote a book. He didn't really, I mean, many objective things. He was homeless and then he died a horrible death. But why do people remember him? Why do people worship him? What did he do? I think there's a lot of interesting things. So in the context of his life, there's a leadership perspective known as servant leadership. And I find that to be fascinating, just because, there's something powerful about a small group of people being committed to something and then getting to the heart of a matter. And very few leaders can really address the heart of a matter effectively so that people sell their homes, their life, they to follow a person or follow an idea.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that speaks to some identity shift as well. So I love servant leadership as well. I mean, Jesus kind of wrote the book on it, literally. But you have to be served before you're willing to shift your identity. Say, yes, this is who I want to be for the
Yeah,
rest of my life. And as a leader, I think it's our job to be that catalyst for identity shift.
sure.
Sometimes people say, this is where I want to be. This is where I'm at. And there's a gap that they don't know how to cross.
Exactly.
And so we as leaders come in and we're not saying, hey, look, I need to grab a hold of you and move you over to where I want you to be, which is, I
Sure.
think, where manipulation is. Like, I think in my mind, that's kind of the big difference between leadership and manipulation is leaders say, hey,
Yeah.
I'm on a mission to a better place and I have a spot for you and I want you on my team and I can teach you what you need to know. Come with me.
Yeah.
And you're saying, well, I have this identity calling, but I'm right here and I don't know how to make the bridge. And so helping them make that bridge, but you can't do that without the trust. And that's where the servant leadership comes in, I think.
Yeah. Well, I think even beyond that too, when I think about one of the biggest components of servant leadership is often generosity. Like we know love that God, because he first loved us, I think so many times, like no one cares about what you know until they know that you care. And you take that principle of
Yeah.
leadership, some of the smartest leaders that I know often spend so many times around the basics of who are you, the soft skills, how do you feel, because it's just it's so important that no one really cares until they know that you care. And when I look at that of how do I first believe that I'm loved, who am I, what am I about, who would I care, when I am in touch with my identity and calling, then I have something to give. And then by giving, there's the magic happens. It's somewhere between me giving and someone following is where the magic happens. And I think that's been really powerful, both in my professional success, my marriage, my family, but there's always more. It's like every leader that I've met is on a journey, and generosity is one component of that journey. And I think, but we're all kind of trying to get deeper into our calling. Who am I? What's my identity? And how can I live that out? My professional life, my finances, my marriage, my relationships. And no one has it figured out. And we're all on the same path. Some of us are further along, some of us are just beginning to start the path, but there's power in that and really asking those deeper questions.
Yeah. Again, I'm kind of speechless. You, for those that have watched the show a bunch, you can appreciate the speechlessness here. This is great. I don't think I can say it better. So maybe we can play with this idea that leadership starts with generosity. I think you said that a second ago. So how much money do you have to have before you can start being generous?
It's a great question. I would say zero. I mean, I think about some of the most generous people I've met have been zero, have had practically nothing. I mean, the widow might, for instance, but in terms of practicality with my work, I mean, I deal with people that are in the poverty line and they make, 20,000 a year, and they just want a way to streamline and simplify their giving. So I'm a generosity catalyst, and what my kind of calling and mission is specifically to ignite freedom and abundance. And that's a deeper aspect of a spiritual, relational sense. That's also financial. So I come in and I help people think through how can you streamline and simplify your giving. But then on top of that, who are you and how can you grow in the context of following God? So I work for a Christian organization, but I work with people that have faith and people that don't have faith. So there's not a specific line, but I work with folks that, are below the poverty line all the way up to some of the wealthiest families in America, helping them think through how they can be more in line with their calling and how they can really unlock additional resources. So one of the ways that we do that is through asset-based gifts. So 90% of Americans' net worth, you got it in, stocks, bonds, real estate, private equity. And, the majority of nonprofits are asking for cash. Well, if you're a business owner, cash is king. But most people don't realize you can unlock those non-liquid assets through gifting, and you can reduce your tax bracket and you can give more than you thought possible. And that can be a game changer for a lot of different organizations, ministries, charities, but it can also transform your marriage, transform your business. There's a lot of really cool things. And so I have the privilege of working with some of the most amazing people in the world because they're trying to grow and into who am I? What's my calling? How can I be generous? And then on the nonprofit side, a lot of nonprofits do amazing work, but they don't think like a business owner. How can I be more efficient? Because they've never been trained and taught to how do I how do I not touch my cash? How can I think creative ways to really scale? Because the purpose of a nonprofit is not profit. It's okay, how can I have an impact? And impact and profit are different things, but it's pretty hard to have an impact if you don't have a sustainable model for growth.
Yeah, there was a huge amount there. I want to go back to asset-based gifts real quick,
Yeah.
because I think that is it's a nuance that you just kind of glossed over there because it's in your world. But I want to harp on that because I think even at that, like you said, you work with top level families and
Yeah.
organizations. You work with mid-level earners. You work with those the executives.
Yeah.
You work with folks below the poverty line. So really, you can help everyone figure out the best way for them to
Yeah.
give and to
Yeah.
the way to give with the most impact, right? We're not just
Exactly.
dropping money in a bucket, which is fine. I'm not saying that you shouldn't drop money in a bucket, but when you reach a spot where you realize, oh, I'm not 20 anymore. I want to be generous as a discipline of my life.
Sure.
That you need a guide, right? And that's where you come in.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about asset-based giving. Let's say that I have, give me a couple of assets that I might have that I might want to give, and then I'm going to ask some questions.
Yeah, I think the easiest thing for a lot of people to understand is, I think, stocks. And I think this one of the most powerful examples is, okay, let's say you buy $1,000 at Apple, 10 years ago. So that $1,000, it's $20,000. Well, there's a lot of different ways to look at that. You could say, okay, I got, $1,000 Apple stock and I can sell that. Well, I'm paying capital gains on the difference between what I paid for it, my cost basis, and what I'm selling it for. So what I'm paying tax on, I'm looking at the spread is $19,000. So, I'm either paying between 0% if, I'm on the lower side of the tax bracket, or I'm paying 20% on cap gains. So 20% of 19 is what I would pay if I sold that asset for a stock. Now, if I'm at the top tax bracket, so I'm at 37%, and or I'm right on the cusp. So then do I want to sell that and then have to pay 37% when I can actually reduce my tax bracket? It can be pretty meaningful. So when you gift stock, for instance, you get a fair market value deduction. So, instead of having to pay between 15 and 20% on that 19,000 gain, you're actually paying zero, and then you get a deduction of $20,000, the fair market value of that asset. And so, but with assets, you can only deduct up to 30%. But that's a powerful thing. So if someone's right on that kind of cusp of their tax bracket, you can actually save more money and give more. But everyone's situation is different. And this is not legal or tax advice, but it's important to realize because, from a
That's
business
all that
owner,
time you spent with lawyers right there. That's what that
yeah,
was.
exactly. But no, from a business standpoint, there's so many creative strategies, and same with creating nonprofits. Like there's vehicles where you can create a simple fund by clicking a button, and you can provide access tax deductible for your employees for whatever needs they have, where you're not administering it. It costs very little and it's anonymous. And then other employees can see that fund, and it can be life-changing. I mean, there's all sorts of strategies that people often don't realize.
Yeah, I'm going to jump on that real quick. That's an exciting opportunity. So traditionally, if we think about giving, we're like, oh, I'll give to the church, or I'll give to whatever,
Yeah.
or my local charity, but whoever you're excited about. But through the National Christian Foundation, you can actually give to individuals.
You can, yeah. Well, so there's an organization that we work with called Helping Hands that enables project-based gifts. So if you find someone who's struggling, as long as they're not a family member, you can say, hey, I want to give to this, employee or this, supplier or whatever. And you can specify, I want the funds to go for healthcare expenses. I want it to go for transportation. I want it to go for whatever. And then you basically let them know what you want to do. It's called Provision Bridge. And they basically say, okay, we'll administer it. Do you want it to be anonymous or not? And just tell us what you want. Then they run it and they execute it. And I mean, there's so many examples. Like Movement Mortgage is one of the fastest growing mortgage companies in America. And they have a great example of utilizing that and transforming lives, not only of their employees, but their suppliers and also their community, and they've been able to create schools and create accelerators and incubators to start other businesses through these types of mechanisms. So there's a lot of different things that are out there and same with impact investing. I mean, a lot of people don't realize you can use charitable funds to invest in other businesses that are having an impact. Now you can't use that for personal use, but you can create, an endowment or a mini fund, and you don't have to have a ton of money. You can have like $100. So there's all sorts of really creative tools that can impact stuff.
You can start a fund with $100.
Yeah, you can start a fund with $100.
See, this is what I love about National Christian Foundation is there are so many ways to give. I think that when I started giving, I went to my local church and I would put money in the bucket, so to speak. And then occasionally there'd be a mission trip or whatever, and I'd put money in, like one of the kids, I'd help him fundraise. And to me, that was the most I could think about giving, right?
Yeah.
And then as I began being a manager and I had some more funds to use, I had stocks, right? I had assets.
Sure.
I know of a friend, we're going to change the names to protect the guilty here. But there was a pastor family, and they had outgrown their house, and he actually gave them a house, um, which is an asset
Oh yeah.
transfer, right? And there's just so many ways to be generous that's
Yeah.
beyond the like salesy fundraising game that people play. So if something's on your heart right now, I'm kind of like speaking to the audience here. If
Yeah.
you in your heart, you're like, I want to do this. I don't want to do the traditional stuff that I'm thinking of, or I have this big asset, but it's locked up. And if I sell
Sure.
it to give the money, I'm going to lose 30% of it or half of it. And how do you even sell that anyway? A lot of times this happens if somebody's family has passed away. Like if a
Yep.
parent has passed, I know when my grandparents passed, I got some stocks, and it took me a while to wrap my brain around how I'm supposed to deal with that gift,
Sure.
that windfall. But the in-kind giving solutions that you have, and then you're just now talking about creating funds for for-profit businesses
Yes.
to
Yeah.
partner with other
Well, and
things.
that's really the magic, yeah, because when you have a for-profit business, a lot of times do people, oh, well, I got an employee, I'm just gonna give them a little bit of money because they're struggling. Well, yeah, you can give them money, but you got to pay tax on that, and then they got to pay tax on that.
And they got to pay,
Whereas
right?
you can get a tax deduction and then give them money, often tax free. Even when it comes to like, I want to buy this employee a car because they're amazing, but they're having some financial difficulties. Well, this organization, Helping Hands, aka Provision Bridge, they go and they'll buy them a car. The lien is in their name, so they know no one's paying property tax because they're a tax exempt organization. That person gets to use the car. So there's creative things like that that are just they're game changer. And then you think about it also in impact investing. It's like you can create charitable businesses where you can actually take on investment, you can issue loans, and you can do it tax free and not have to pay tax. Now those are more complex to be able to set up, but there's so many creative vehicles that you can do that most people just don't know. But a lot of it comes down to, hey, what's the purpose? Why are you being generous, and what do you want to do? And everything kind of comes out of that. And that's where I think it's always best to start simple of, okay, do I want to be generous? And if so, is that time? Is that relationships? Is that money? And there's a lot of things you can do, but it's always good to start small and then say, okay, yeah, I want more. Well, here's an idea. Have you thought about this? So there's tons of different solutions.
I love that. Starting small and moving. So let's talk real quick about some of the benefits of living the generous life. And
Yeah.
I'm not trying to wax eloquently and put us in some orange robes and talk about
Yeah.
mantras here.
Yeah.
No, in reality, I remember very specifically the moment that I had this outside thought, almost audible to me, and it said, "Are you gonna? You can, I'll never. You're not guaranteed to be rich, but
Yeah.
you can guarantee to be a generous person." And
Yeah.
since then, there's been a huge source of joy for my wife and I as we've given time, as we've given resources,
Yeah.
expertise. It's some of the greatest joys of my life. And I think it was Alex Hermosi that recently said, he articulated it so well.
Yeah.
He said, people say money can't buy happiness, but that's a lie. Money does buy happiness. You just have to give it away.
Yeah.
And I love that because when you're touching money, which you have to touch and manage as a
Yeah.
leader, as a business owner, as somebody that's making impact in the world, you're touching large amounts of the bigger impact you have, the more money
Exactly.
you're touching. Um, to know that it's not a corrosive element, it can actually be a source of great joy if you know how to manage it. And generosity, I think, is the key there.
Yeah.
So I'll kind of turn the floor over to you on that. And then I want to ask you about some of the folks,
Yeah.
some of the stories that you're most proud of.
Well, I think a huge component though is, and obviously this is my perspective, and I would say the Christian perspective, but there's other people from different faith backgrounds and they may have different perspectives. But I do think there's a really powerful idea of, okay, if you believe that Jesus is the Son of God, then he owns everything. And we
Mhm.
are stewards. So technically we own nothing, which is a really hard thing as a business owner for me to wrestle with of, okay, I'm managing this. I've got children, I've got, you know, old elderly parents, I have responsibilities and needs. But if it's really all God's, it kind of frees me up because I think there's so many decisions that I make as a business owner where what's the effect of this? This is someone's livelihood on the line. This is an investment decision. These are important decisions that have consequences, but there's a freedom in knowing if it's not mine and I get to be a steward, there's a responsibility, but there's a freedom that it's going to work out. And I think there's something magical that happens when someone's able to realize that, because then you can take risks that are calculated, and it's a different mindset. And I think that's the scarcity to abundance mindset. If it's not mine, then I have the ability to be more free, because you know what
Yes.
and so I think that's a big component of what I do, is I help people transition from scarcity to abundance. In scarcity, I got to get mine because my business is going to go under, and everyone's a competitor. Whereas, no, I'm a collaborator. I have value. I can create business. I can do investments, but there is so much power as a steward, and that mindset as a steward creates opportunities such as an abundance mindset. Because then, you can make amazing investments. You can bless someone, but there's a freedom of knowing that you're not alone in that decision, and
Mhm.
that there is a deeper story that we get to tap into. And I think one of the biggest challenges I see is alienation and isolation. I'm running a business, no one knows who can give me advice, who can speak into it. But when I'm on this journey, I'm with other people. I'm
Mhm.
utilizing, I'm sharing resources that have been shared with me, and I get to learn from other people. And it's a totally different mindset, but it's hard to find people on that wavelength who can share and collaborate with.
I again am a bit speechless. You mentioned this a couple times throughout the show, and I didn't pull on it because frankly I didn't know how to pull on it, but I'm going to pull on it now. You said we talked about giving, and then you would follow it with these weird statements like, and it helped me be a better husband, it made me a better spouse, it made me a better family member.
Yeah,
And I think this is what you're talking about. Giving money, putting $5 in a bucket doesn't make you a better husband or wife or spouse. It doesn't make you a better dad, doesn't make you a better friend.
sure.
But putting $5 with no expectation of return. This is not I'm
Yeah,
putting in $5. Like, I think there's a whole branch of false generosity where if I give, then I get, which is a
yeah,
transactional thing. And sometimes we like, hey, would you refer me to Jerry? Because
sure.
and then I'll give you a 10% cut. Like that's a very,
Or, "Hey, I'm a
very
Christian
transactional.
businessman. Look out."
Yeah, right, right. And then we put a little layer in there. We're like, well, I'll give, and then the universe will give back to me, right? So we put some
Yeah.
layers in there. But when you truly give, because it's the right thing to do, because you're called to it, because your heart is urging you to do it, it shifts something in your soul that
Yeah.
allows you to be generous in other places. That allows you to forgive. So, what are some of the shifts that you've seen in your heart or in some of your clients'
Well,
hearts as
I
they've
think
been more generous?
yeah, I think the biggest question that when I got married, and one of the things that I was really wrestling with is, what is my marriage about? What's the purpose of my marriage? And one of the things that my wife and I discovered is we believe that we're called to create safe places to inspire beauty and freedom. So
Mm,
why did I start? Why did I work in government? Why did I uh, you know, start a PPE business or safety business? Well, safety is helping create safe places, but then I'm creating profit and opportunities and jobs, which enable economic freedom and growth and spiritual wholeness and all these other things. The generosity kind of perspective was my marriage got transformed because I started giving stocks. I received a small inheritance and my business did well. I'm like, what do I do with this wealth? I never thought that I'd have this resource, never thought I'd, become a millionaire and have all these different opportunities. But I started feeling this stress and bondage. If I don't
mm.
perform, I don't hit these numbers, I'm going to get fired. My shareholders are going to hate me. What am I going to do? And then I started, realizing, well, maybe it's not mine. If I live in Haiti and I'm the world's best entrepreneur in Haiti, I'm probably not going to be, as successful as the average American. So
Yeah,
much
that's
life is
right.
grace. And so I started tapping in and I'm like, well, maybe what if I give some stock away? Well, I gave more money than I ever thought away via stock because I had some appreciated assets. So the tax benefit was amazing. But then I did it initially from selfish reasons. Oh, I want to lower my taxes. Then I was like, wow, seeing the impact that I had was
Oh, yeah.
shocking of like, oh
Yeah.
my gosh, this person, is alive, but got letters from different people. It's like, it's just really cool to see how God uses a little bit of resources, which is my resource, probably nothing compared to some others, but the freedom that I received in my marriage, and then as a parent, and then as a business owner, I was able to sleep at night, and I was like, "Man, I don't have to worry about this stuff." There's a deeper
Mm,
story that's meaningful. So the other thing was, um, it's like being part of my calling and being able to live that out. I don't think you have to be in ministry or in business or I mean, you can be in any facet and be in tune with what you're doing. But for me, I just got so much freedom out of giving. And I feel like there's a story that most people don't know because someone's got an ulterior motive. Hey, give me money. And I'm just how can I help you to be in line with your calling, whether it's with me or with somebody else? If it's not yours, there's a freedom in that. And just, and there's so many solutions that can improve your marriage, your life. But a lot of it is what makes you come alive. So is that, doing business deals? Is that, collecting coins? Is that, exercising? Is that mentoring young men? I mean, there's so many things and we all have our unique calling. And when we operate from that, we come alive. And then generosity is not a chore because a lot of people I know, they just don't, I don't like this. Well, if you don't like it, then why are you doing it? But it's hard because we feel a sense of guilt with surrounding money and shame, but there's freedom in that. But a lot of it is what makes me come alive and how can I enter into that? And then, there's just really great things that can kind of happen. But one thing I'll share about the tool is there is a really amazing way that you can realize both freedom when you give and do it more effectively. And that is a donor advised fund. So for people who aren't familiar with that, that's a charitable checking account. And that is kind of a huge component in terms of what I do is help people educate them on the basis. If you're a business owner, or you are in sales, it is a phenomenal tool. And that's kind of what enabled me to give from assets and really got me kind of opened up to this idea of what is my calling.
yeah. So I love this. It's been kind of fun. We've talked about like the baseline generosity, putting money in a bucket, right?
Yep.
And we've talked about the mindset. We've talked about the tax benefits. But I think, and we talked about the ability to set up and support charities and support
Sure.
businesses. But I think this may be the funnest one is the ability to say, I have a windfall right now
Sure.
and I want to give, but I don't see something that catches my heart. It's not a
Yep.
control thing, but like, especially as you get higher in leadership, you realize the dearth, the desert that we live in is people with an abundance mindset that
Yeah.
can be trusted to run programs, right? It's
Exactly.
leadership is our problem, not money. I mean,
Yeah.
America has so much money, it's stupid. I mean, like every state in America is like a higher GDP than most countries everywhere.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's insane. Our abundance is crazy. So it's not an abundance problem that we have, and it's not a time problem.
Yeah.
It's not a work problem, and it's not actually really a moral problem. And we have maybe one of the most moral societies ever. Our problem is leadership, people that
Yeah.
know how to steward those resources. So, all right, that was kind of a long diatribe. What's exciting about the donor advised fund is it allows me to put money, like you said, in a checking account.
Yeah.
So I get a windfall. Maybe I'm in PPE sales, and then
Yeah.
COVID happens. You get this windfall, and you're like, okay, I want to give. I want to give this year. Taxes, like maybe that kind of timing makes sense. But I don't see who I should give it to. So now you can create this fund where you have more control, not like in a miserly sense. So you can give wisely over a longer period of time. Have I hit the cool?
Yeah. So
So
yeah, that's the basic gist. Yeah.
it allows you to separate in time the receiver and the gift. And I think that frees you up individually because you're like, I still have some control of this money, but it's not mine.
Yeah.
And that's exciting. It's like this money is just for doing good. Um, can you again change the names to protect the guilty here? Can you tell me a story about somebody that's done that and how it's changed their life besides yourself?
Yeah, I think one good friend of mine, I'll just change his name, just say his name is Fred, but just a few months ago, so he owns a sizable amount of a privately held company, and he reached out to us and he wanted to give about 4% of that privately held company of
Mhm.
shares that he owns. So we helped him with that process and basically, um, he gifted that to us. So the way that that works is we kind of first assess, hey, what do you want to do? What's that time frame? All this sort of stuff. File an 8283 form with the IRS. They did a valuation of the company, and then they do a valuation of his shares. and then we own that. He gifted us that. He gets immediate tax break. And then what happens is, when he wants to, he can redeem those shares, and then he turns those into a liquid, cash, basically. Now we own those, but he gets to advise where he wants those to go and when. And so recently, there's a few $100,000 that he was able to execute on that. And, he's saving some people's lives, in the context of substance abuse, and doing some really cool stuff there.
Mm,
And so, but it's like, you think about, he had not one, but two benefits. One is the tax benefit. Two is, okay, I don't know where to give a few $100,000, but I need to do this from a tax planning standpoint. And then three, those have since appreciated. So we own those, but they're appreciating and they're continuing to appreciate, but he still gets to determine when and where those go. And so I think that's a really cool thing, because it makes non-liquid assets meaningful. So that's kind of one. Another thing is, I'm working, there's ambiguity surrounding how you gift equine gifts. So like, just like real estate, you can, any asset you can structure any creative way. So some businesses are S corp, they're C corp, they're LLC. Well, a lot of people hold a lot of different assets. So there's a family I'm working with, and they're trying to navigate, hey, we've got a lot of resources with horses, and we want to give some of those away, but it can get pretty complex because of how you depreciate. And so, but they're also trying to do some really amazing things in the context of homelessness. And they want to create businesses. So instead of, hey, I'm giving you some money or I'm feeding you, how do I teach you how to run a business so that
mm.
you can be generous? Which I get super excited about, because I think that is sustainability. Everyone's looking, hey, I need money. Well, why don't you start a business so that you can lift other people out of poverty? That's a harder mindset, but it's a powerful solution. So you take an asset, instead of giving someone a gift, you create a business, and you teach homeless people and people basic skills of how do you become a business owner, how can you motivate and inspire other people to start businesses. So both of those are great examples where you take a horse, and then you say, okay, I want to gift this, but I want to teach someone how to start a business. So that's where the mix, you got a charity that's helping educate business owners to be better stewards and start other businesses, which I just think is super cool.
No, I love that. But the other thing I love about that, and I'm going to stem political here for a second, not super political. I think I'm a smaller government guy. I think smaller government, because there's inherent inefficiencies of me giving my tax dollars to a collection agency, which then goes to a budgeting agency, which then decides what to do with it, which then reads grants, which then resubmits, which then delivers.
Sure.
Like, ignoring the politics behind that, every touch you put on a dollar bill costs money, right?
Yeah.
And so it's super inefficient. In this case, what you have is you have a family that said, I want to make a significant societal impact. And I'm not talking about the voting polls. I'm talking about, I just see a pain and I feel
Yeah.
called to solve it. And so NCF gives you a way to do that, not in a way that needs a budget approval through 17 committees and needs to be
Yeah.
attached to the bottom of a pork barrel. Like, no, you just go do it. You can just
Yeah.
do it. You don't have to
Yeah.
sponsor a politician to get them to put you on a docket. You can just go make, and that it cuts out so many middlemen.
Yeah.
And the other thing, and this is a huge one, is, I'm also a Christian. We're both men of faith here. Oftentimes, my calling is not to save the world. My
Yeah.
calling is to save 7 people in Lower Lexington,
Yeah.
and then I do that, and then maybe there's another calling. But it's this rolling calling. I think that they grow, obviously, but I've seen a lot of people that are like, well, I want to be generous. So they're down here, like, I put some money in a bucket. Oh, I guess I need to solve
Yeah.
polar bears. I mean, maybe, but probably not. Probably you just need to help Susie, who is in your organization or who's at your church or whose daughter is on your soccer team or whatever. The
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
generosity is really, and you said this earlier, we're just us.
Yeah.
It, it's just us. Excuse me. As I worked in corporate America, and then
Sure.
now I do my own stuff. And I worked at several corporations. And as a manager, I sell to you, hey, you should be loyal to the corporation
Sure.
because I have a career path. That's the promise, is that I have this career path for you. But once you switch a company or two, you realize it's just us. I mean, there is some promotions available, and there's definitely great, but it's just
Yeah.
us helping each other. Like,
Well, it's true, and people leave people. They don't leave corporations or companies. Everyone's, "Oh,
right.
well, how much money do you want? How do you" well, do you wanna say, "Hey, I just think you're a bad employer. I don't like you." I mean, that's a lot, because then you look at people and you're like, "Why did you take this massive pay cut?" Well, people say culture, but culture means people.
Culture means people. It means leadership, which is what,
Exactly.
actually, culture is the exact reason I'm doing leadership, because I think it's so important.
Yeah.
We are kind of running close on time here. I am super excited about you, specifically you, and what you're doing with the National Christian Foundation. I've gotten to give, NCF has helped me give personally. I know that it's changed your life, and
Yeah.
you're changing other people's lives. As we close out the show here, give me 3 or 4 bullet points that you want folks to take away from, and maybe how they can contact you.
Well, I think the main thing is just what is your what is your legacy? What are you doing? Because I think so many times, even as a business owner, I didn't have an exit plan. I was doing because I fell into what I was doing, but thinking about, like, Simon Sinek talks about the why, start with
Mhm.
why. It's not always relevant, but I do think in the context of legacy, financial planning, there's a huge component, and I think most people settle for the how. Well, I just have to get this sales, or I need to meet this person, or hire and as opposed to what's the why. And I had the realization of, okay, I'm not a ministry guy. I'm not a safety guy. I'm running a safety company. I'm doing well, but why? And getting to that point was radically shifted my perspective and made me start working for a ministry. But I think that's been really huge too, because even with financial planning, we all want to be rich. When I have a ton of money, why? But then you look at what Scripture
Mhm.
says. Scripture kind of says, actually, we want freedom, peace, and contentment. But your peace and freedom may be different than my peace and freedom. So that's a really important but really hard question to ask. But that is the difference, I think, between success and failure, because I've seen so many people that have more money than they know what to do with, and
Mhm.
they're well known. They have lots of money. They've accomplished many things, but they're miserable. And it's really hard to see. Whereas I know a lot of people who don't have that perspective, and do they appear to have all these things that are deemed successful, and they have contentment, they have joy, and they have peace. And it's not about give your money away or make a ton of money. It's about what is the deeper meaning behind what we're doing, why we're doing it. And so I would just say, what's your legacy, and what is the why behind what you're doing? And that fuels into your marriage, your parenting, your financial planning, your success as a business owner, an entrepreneur. And it also will get you in touch with what are you passionate about? Because I don't know anyone who's a generous person that's a bad person or miserable person. Every person
Mm.
I know that's generous is amazing. I feel like I got the best job in the world because I get to be around people that inspire me to be a better leader, better father, a better husband, better business owner, better investor. So I just think the why is a huge component, because when we get to that why, we naturally are going to level up our leadership, level up our game.
Again, I'm absolutely speechless. We we gotta close out the show. If you're listening, even if if you're at the poverty line, or if you have hundreds of millions of dollars to give, but you don't know how to do it, there is a way to make it happen. And Blazer Smith and the National Christian Foundation is going to help you with that. Come meet this generosity catalyst and watch him change your world, change your life, and most importantly, change the rest of ours too. So we're waiting on you. Don't hold back. Reach out to Blazer Smith. You can find him on LinkedIn. Where else can we find you?
You can also find me at the ncfgiving.com, and then on LinkedIn as well. So there's a lot of different ways you can kind of connect with me. So, but
Right,
yeah,
NCF Giving.
ncfgiving.com. Yeah.
NCFgiving.com. That's down here on the bottom of the screen. If you're listening, if you're watching the show, if you're listening to the show, go look them up. Tell them I sent you. And with that, we are out.